Hello and welcome to 5.3 Break-Even Analysis. This is part of Topic 5, Operation Management, going from 611 to 731 in your textbook. It's good to get into 5.2 first before getting to 5.3 because you need to know about the fixed costs and the variable and some of the contributions. You better do the math nice and easily in 5.3. Let's jump straight into it. I've got here a nice little summary sheet for you about going through the different terms and the main formulas you're going to have, the contribution part, break-even, analysis and quantities, the margins of safety, and even why it's good and bad to do it. Now, I've given you a bit of an example one to run through with the math and the bits you have to put down to get the full marks when you draw the charts. Pretty much it's going to be a 50-50 today, going through all the main areas, and there's going to be some skills shown later on for the procedural parts about actually doing it on paper and getting ready to go. So we'll get right into it. I've got these two videos for you, and this is I think it's the Jacobson or Jakobson. These are excellent videos just to go and watch in your own time. So these spell it out even more straightforward than I'll do it, to say this is exactly what you've got to do to meet a break-even chart and break-even analysis. This one here, they get into it once you've analysed it, then doing the contributions. So how do you then basically apply it to a case study in good depth? And for your viewing pleasure, I've got together the final bits of the mega factories for Lego. Highly recommend going through all of it and thinking about the production methods, and then also think about when do you break even when you're making the bricks. For your learning outcomes today, basically, can you graph it? Can you work out the numbers behind it to do break-even quantity, profit, and margin of safety? All these things are really important to get you those full marks and stuff. This is the SL part. The HL stuff will be in 5.3b. Okay. Going over the main definitions, break-even point, or the BEP. This is the bit where neither profit nor loss is made. Basically, your total revenue equals your total cost. This is the bit where you want to get to as soon as possible in your production, because once you've met it, every unit after that means a unit of profit, which is very nice. The actual chart is the chart that you'll see with the total costs and the total revenue coming together, and the break-even point being where it intersects. And I'll put down this example, T.R.A.C.E, and it's an acrostic or an acronym for you to remember how to draw it up so you can get yourself usually at 5 or 6 marks that's allocated to these questions. Profit and loss. Profit's basically when total revenue is greater than total cost, and vice versa. A loss is going to be when total cost is greater than total revenue. And being able to draw it on the chart so you can label where the regions and the zones are for where loss and profit's being made. Margin of safety is essentially the level of demand or the productive capacity minus the break-even quantity that you want to make. And that'll make more sense later when I show you some of the graphs. Level of demand is the expected sales, so how much they expect to do it. This can be based, if you go back to that forecasting part in 4.2 in marketing, and it can also be based off benchmarking as well, what they expect to get. And finally, this is the easiest profit formula I have. There are other formulas you can use, but I just like margin of safety times by contribution. It's a nice, easy one to remember. We'll go straight into it. This is what the chart looks like. So this is the ultimate thing you're aiming to get. Note how you've got the chart title at the top, and there are the two fours. So the break-even chart for whatever the case study says, for whatever product's being made. On here you've got revenue, cost, and profit, so make sure you put all those three down. And I'll go into detail later on for all the things that you have to put through. Your output in your units, your full capacity or your level of demand up here, your total revenue, your total cost, total fixed cost, and most importantly your break-even point. Now I want to go to the next slide just to show you this is what the actual IB examiners look at to get you your marks. And this is what I see repeated in the examiners' reports. And this is where I think it's a little bit silly. You get 1 mark for labeling the axes, so cost, your revenues and your profit, and your output. You get 1 mark for accurately drawing the total revenue curve. You get 1 mark for the total cost curve. So even if you stuff up the figures, as long as you write the thing, the own figure rule applies. If you get the fixed costs in the target profit area drawn correctly, there's another mark. And if you identify, as in from the break-even point going down, what's the output, that's another mark. So there are 5 marks here, potentially 6, just from drawing it. You could have stuffed everything up completely, but if you put it all together, this is what the examiners have told the moderators to go into. So I'm still a bit sort of confused. Note, however, if you don't draw it clearly and neatly, you can get knocked down to 3 marks. And if you do it as a table, like in the British system, if you go through and you look at the A-level stuff, if you do it as a table rather than a chart, you can actually get 0 marks. Just make sure you put it together in the right fashion. So here's the thing, you can see what they see and what you have to do to get the full marks. Alright, let's do the math. So this is the actual break-even point. This isn't given on the formula sheet, you just have to know it. It's the total fixed cost over contribution, and contribution is the price minus the variable costs. So if I go through it here, whoops, I jumped too far ahead. If I've got my price per unit, and I've got my marketing, and note this is per unit, this is per month, and per unit per unit. So this sort of gives you a hint. These ones here, when it has unit cost or batch cost and so forth, these are considered to be the variable costs. The ones are done per month, as in they don't change, you got to pay per month. These are the fixed costs. It's a bit of a hint to tell you which are the fixed, as in the fixed up here, and which are the variables to go in here. They tell you the level of demand, so you can work out your margin of safety and your profits and so forth. So if I was going to take my 200s, which is my total fixed costs, I chuck them in here, I divide by my price, which is given to me per unit, and I minus off my variable costs. So I'm going to end up with 200 divided by 5. So my break-even point is going to be 40 units, and the break-even quantity will also be 40 units. Have a crack at some of the examples. That's just the basics of how it comes together. So if we had to take that bit and we had to now stick it into a chart, I've got this bit of an acronym for you to bring it all into one place. Remember TRACE. So make sure you got the correct title with the 2 4s. You get out your ruler to rule up the lines nice and neat. You label your axes correctly. You put in your costs and revenues, your total revenue, total fixed costs, and total costs. And then finally enter your even point. And you can feel pretty comfortable that you've done all the requirements to get yourself the full marks. Make sure you get the math right too to feel confident. So we'll see an example now how TRACE comes together. So make sure you chuck the title in, and there's the double 4s, and make sure you call it a chart. It's not a point, it's not break-even point, it's not break-even analysis. You might even lose a mark if you write those wrong words in. You're definitely doing a break-even chart. Make sure you grab your ruler, nice and neat on the sides as you go through. Don't hand draw it. You saw on the previous marking thing, you can go down to 3 marks if you stuff this up. Alright, chuck in your axes. So revenues and costs, I've actually missed out the word profit in there just to be 100%. And in whatever currency they give it to you in the case study. And then you have your output in units. So this might be output in cars, or output in toys, or whichever you're making, and so forth down the bottom. Make sure you label it nice and neat because there's marks given to this in the scoring. Alright, chuck in your costs. So you can chuck in your TR. Note the TR always goes from this corner going directly up. The total fixed cost is always a straight line. And where the total cost and the total revenue intersect is going to be the break-even point. Make sure you state the value of the TFC on the side here, like the 5,000, or in what we're looking at before, we're looking at 200. Finally, make sure you put in your break-even point and draw your trace down line to go down and write in this value what it's going to be. So we worked out before it was 40 units. I'm going to have my 200 here for the total fixed cost and my 40 for my units. And you can feel confident that you've met all the points to get the full marks. Alright, so now to have a look at margin of safety. Margin of safety is the region between the break-even point, this should actually be break-even quantity there, it should be a Q, between the break-even quantity and the level of demand, what your expected sales are going to be. So the margin of safety, this is really the differences between the full capacity, level of demand, and the break-even point. Why do you need to have this? Like, what's the point? You can use it to work out your profit that you're going to get. You can also use it to cover muda, so if you make mistakes, so if you make the full level of capacity and some stuff up, you know you're still making profit in a sense. You can also use it for your marketing team, so if they want to give out some free samples, you know you're still making profit because you've gone past it and your margin of safety tells you how much buffer you've got to give out. And it can also help you work out your capacity issues. So if you're not working at 100%, you may be working at 80%, you're going to have to times your margin of safety by that 0.8 to reduce it down because you've got capacity issues. That did pop up in an IB question a few years back. And in general, like this big wonderful baby eating a giant piece of watermelon, the bigger the margin of safety, the better. More profit for you in a sense. Margin of safety times by contribution. The more you've got to give out, the more samples, the more areas you can cover. That's where a business wants to be at. So how do you work out this margin of safety? Well, it told before that the level of demand was 100 and your break-even point was 40, your break-even quantity. So your 100 minus the 40, so you've got a margin of safety of 60 units. So you could give away 5 in a sense, and you still know that you're making profit overall. All right. Where does the profit and the loss get represented on the chart? In here is the loss region in a sense. So anywhere from this point of the coordinates up to here is considered loss. It's a visual representation, so if the operation manager was presenting to the board, he'd be able to say, look, we can see visually how much the loss is in comparison to, say, the profit. So the loss region's much bigger than the profit region if you just look at this chart here. It's not as accurate as the other one because technically you should be at 40 here and 60 here, so it looks visually stupid, but I think you get the idea. It allows you to visually see where's our profit, where's our loss as it comes up. So how do you work out the profit and loss is the next big question. This is done by the margin of safety times by the contribution. So once we've worked out that our margin of safety was 60, which was the 100 minus the 40, what we're going to do is we're going to times it by contribution. And the contribution was the unit price of 10 minus the variable costs that came in. So it's going to be 60 times by your 5 and you get $300 profit, which is nice. 300 bucks is great for a particular unit item that you might be selling. If this figure comes back as negative, it's considered to be a loss in a sense. That's pretty much about it really. Alright, I've got some deductive reasoning stuff here for you. I'd like you to have a look at each of these 3 different products. The Krispy Kreme donuts, which look sweet and I'd love to eat one right now because I'm quite hungry. Galvanized screws and this camper van. Can you identify what production method they should have used? So thinking back to 5.1, what do you think the BEP required? So is it going to break even really early or really late? What do you think? And how do you think they might use margin of safety in part of their marketing plans? So feel free to pause it now. All right. Identify the production methods. Krispy Kreme, these are most likely done in batches. Galvanized screws, most likely done in mass. And the camper van, most likely done in job. The break-even point for these ones, I'm guessing your break-even point for your donuts is coming pretty early for these ones. You can't really talk about figures too much, but because it's a consistent product they're making every single day, the chance of them having muda and errors and so forth isn't going to be as high because they're making the same consistent product each time. So I'm guessing the break-even point will be earlier than it would be later. With your galvanized screws, the same kind of idea. Because they're making the same thing over and over again, you should be able to push that economies of scale down as much as you can. So your total fixed costs, if you can keep decreasing that, and you keep fixing down your raw materials, you should be able to get a nice break-even point and earlier rather than later. The camper van, because it's a job thing, you don't know each time how much it's going to get to. There's a lot of variables involved, so there might be break-even later in a sense. IB is never going to ask you this as a technical question, but I just want you to make you think about if you're planning for stuff earlier, in theory you should break even quicker than you should later. So what's the point of having this margin of safety? So we can give out samples, we can cover for any errors that go out, and also help us with our productive capacity to know that we're actually meeting our full use of the factory. If we're not meeting our full use of the factory, the margin of safety is being damaged because we're not at 100% capacity. Alright, on here I've got Subway sandwiches for you, and I've given you some maths on the side. I'd like you to go through and just try to work this one out and discuss, more importantly, this margin of safety. Do you think the margin of safety is sufficient for this product right now? That's the big tricky question. So feel free to pause it now and we'll go into it. Alright, cool. If we had to do the maths, so what's identify the price? We've got $7 per unit. What's the fixed costs? It's going to be, see it says per week rather than per unit on here. This one here is going to be $300 for the total fixed cost, and the variable cost is going to be $2. I know I've got the dollar sign here with the week, and it sort of sounds stupid, but yeah, just bear with me on this one. So to do the break-even point, if we add together the 300 and we divide by the 7 minus the 2, we're going to get 5. So 300 divided by 5 gets you my 60. So when would the 60 occur in the week? This is a bit tricky. So if we did 60 out of the 100 that we plan on selling, if we did, that's 60% of the 7-day week. I'm guessing somewhere around Thursday is when it's ideally going to start breaking even. So Monday making a loss, Tuesday making a loss, Wednesday making a loss, Thursday, there you go. Starting to make profit on a Thursday. Is it good to get 4 days in and then actually start making a profit? Level of demand was 100 and we worked out that the break-even quantity was 60. That means our margin of safety is going to be 40. Now the idea is, do you really think 40 is enough for a sufficient production? This is where I want to make you think sort of stuff. If you're looking at it as in 60% out of the 100, you're still making a loss, and the 40% is when you start making profit. Would you be happy doing these sandwiches? Wouldn't you rather it came a lot earlier, like at 50% or 40%? Because then you get 60%. Well, duh, yeah. I'd love to get more profit, but do you want to continue with items that break even so late in the week and take such a long time before they start making profit? That's the logic behind doing this stuff. Is it worthwhile committing all your time and money and resources to something that tends to break even 4 days into the week and you're only making 40 units? That's where you might start divesting some things, or work about trying to make, say, your marketing or some of these units a bit cheaper. Maybe even upping the price potentially, and that would change the break-even point again. Alright, here's a show called Deadliest Catch, and if you want to have a go look on YouTube to have a crack at it and see what it's like. This one here, I'll just give you a bit of a hint. I've tooled it so it looks like you have to make a hard decision. So feel free to pause it now, and we'll go through the math together. Okay, Deadliest Catch, what's the break-even point on this one? So we've got 30,000 on top here, and we're going to do 400 minus the 100, so it's going to be 30,000 divided by your 300. Sorry, I keep taking my number, by the 300, so we're going to get ourselves 300 units. When you're going through the math on this one here, having a level of 100 as my break-even quantity, and knowing my level of demand is 400, so my margin of safety is going to be 300. BEP of 100, margin of safety of 300, and going through and constructing your fully labeled break-even chart. With your break-even chart, remember to trace your title, chuck your ruler down, put your correct axes in, put your correct total costs, total revenue, total fixed cost, and label the amounts to the total fixed cost, and then more importantly, put down your break-even quantity at the bottom of 100. Now this is the tough bit. Do you think the captain should continue to fish for the Alaskan king crab? So what I'm going to define out of this one would be his actual strategic goals. His strategic goal is to get a desired profit of 15,000. Is he going to be able to get 15,000 by working through his costing structure? That's sort of the example. Some advantages of doing this is it helps communicate to his staff the desired goals and what he wants to do. It also helps motivate his workers and himself to reach those goals through Taylorism. Some of the disadvantages of this is going to be that you're in a very highly dangerous area with big insurance. Insurance is twice the wages. And also the cost of the net repair is going to be a bit of a pain. Overall, if I then had to tie the math into it and so forth, how much profit is he going to get? Is he going to be able to reach his 15,000? So if he's going to get a margin of safety of 300 units, and his contribution is going to be the 400 minus the 100, I've now got $300 per unit. So I'm making roughly 90,000 bucks there. So the 90,000 bucks is much better than the desired profit of the 15,000. This is really good and really useful for him to get into. So it's definitely recommended for him to continue doing this business, despite the fact there's a lot of insurance costs to it, and also the repair on his nets and the bait and everything else being a bit of a hassle. Recommend this guy, and this is why they go out and Deadliest Catch and make a lot of money. Alright, we'll finish up there. Can you go through and try the worksheet attached in the description part below, and read over your IB questions you'll find in the back of your textbook. And if you want to read over chapter 5.3, put a summary down in the description again for you so you can read through each of the notes. Now, do you feel as though you can do the graphical, the trace part? Do you feel as though you can do the break-even point, break-even quantity, work out the margin of safety and profit for each of these bits? If you can do that roughly for the 6 marks, you're on your way to success. If you want to get into a bit further, have a look at Benjamin Graham and how he influenced Warren Buffett with the margin of safety, particularly in the financial areas. It's good high-level stretching stuff. And why margin of safety is often written in percentage form rather than unit form. So looking at percentages, think back to when we were having a look at the Subway sandwiches, and margin of safety has a really powerful impact on business strategy and decision. If you want to go back into some of the fundamentals, have a look at the Tutor to You and the Biz Ed. But that's pretty much it for the SL part and 5.3a, and I'll see you again in 5.3b.